welcome to chapter number 3 in this book, again, Purchasing and Supply Chain Management by Arjen van Wielen. It's the 5th edition. I do know that the 6th edition is out there, so maybe I will start using the 6th edition book, but this short video will be using the 5th edition. Chapter 3 is about the purchasing management process. And as it is here on page number 51, it says purchasing management relates to all activities necessary to manage the supply relationship in such a way that the activities are aligned with the company's overall business strategies and interests. So how do we then do that? And that is what I will take you through this short video. Primary task and responsibilities is, as we saw also in the last lecture, it is really to secure timely and undisrupted availability of purchased goods and services, just like it says here on the slide. It is also, so it's really there to support, as we saw in Porter's value chain illustration, that purchasing sits on top as a support function to the primary activities. So it is here to secure that we have availability of what we need in the company. It is also here to control and reduce all purchase-related spend. Has always been in focus and will always probably stay in focus, that the procurement/purchasing department is here to really support in reducing the spend. As I said in the last lecture, a lot of cost is controlled inside the purchasing department. Third, reduction of the company's risk exposure. Risk management is a hot topic and has been so for a while, and procurement is really a strong player in reducing the risk that a company is exposed to from a supply market perspective. And then finally, equally important and equally in focus in this lecture is the contribution to product and process innovation. It is the development. How do we develop products faster? And here comes the time to market into play, and that is where procurement is a strong player in making that happen. Looking at it from another viewpoint is that the changing agenda, as the headline says, is really that procurement has traditionally been very cost orientated. How do we reduce our cost has been the main focus. But you can see here now there is a interrelationship between three bubbles. One, cost is still there. You see that down in the left hand corner. But now you're also seeing on top of the whole thing, value. Value improvement is really central. And then on the right hand side you see risk, because you need to balancing up with the risk. So there's this interrelationship, and let's just stay on this slide for a second. Value is really central. I mean, how revenue growth through new products is one thing, improve customer value proposition, and here we have it. Early supplier involvement in NPD is a key focus area for the purchasing department. Faster new product introductions, as I talked about, time to market, and then co-branding and advertising. So value is of central importance to have in focus when you are managing a procurement department. And then of course the traditional one, cost reduction, supply base reduction, and we have seen that happening quite a bit over the last couple of decades, is that we are really shrinking in our supply base to really try to get the transaction cost down and the relationship cost down, and improve the relationships with the ones that we are then maintaining to get over to the value creation part. So limit the supply base in order to make it possible to start really adding much more value from your supply base. Product standardization is also a key element for procurement, looking through the bill of materials to see can we standardize even further, securing that there are approved vendors on the list. Global sourcing, we saw that the last time as well. We understand that better and better. What is it that we need to source globally and what should we source locally? And then we have here outsourcing and offshoring. What is it that we need to do ourselves versus what is it that we can buy in? So the classic make-buy decision. And then we have offshoring here, and nearshoring is also coming up. I mean, what is it that we need to source from overseas suppliers? What can be sourced from local? And here is the lead time effect that we need to understand. That's also why I've added that in under the box, inventory reduction through lead time reductions, because procurement is also a strong player in the effect of actually looking at the overall pipeline inventory in a supply chain, and then reduce that the lead times and thereby also the level of inventory that we have in our pipeline. We also see contract management and electronic auctions as a way to reduce cost. Over on the risk side, single versus multiple sourcing, very, very key and central to look at within procurement. If we do have single sourced items, but how do we then work with risk management? And that is a chapter on its own. Performance-based contracting, corporate social responsibility, really coming up now. CSR is the short name for that. How do we secure that that our whole supply base and upstream supply chain is working according to agreed upon CSR conditions? And it goes into sustainable purchasing. Supplier quality assurance, how do we secure that our suppliers is performing with high quality? And supplier financial positioning. I mean, we would like, of course, to have a supplier both today and also tomorrow, and therefore you need to risk evaluate our supply base to make sure that it can deliver, as I said, both today and also in the future. The last but not least, within risk, IP, intellectual property protection is very central when you are thinking about that we have now these very long extended supply chains reaching quite often we talk about IP rights when we are looking at the Asian-based supply chains. China has often been mentioned in that regard, so there is a lot of risk to be looked at, and you need to look at it from an interrelated perspective. And one simple example is if you want to reduce the unit cost by getting products out of Asia, then you also, in many instances, increasing the risk, and you need to safeguard against the risk, which might also come with a price tag to it. And therefore you need to balance this whole view. And what about value? I mean, is it as easy to develop up the value with a offshore vendor versus a local one? So this whole triangle needs to be very carefully balanced up. Okay, moving on to the purchasing management process, as the headline is saying. So the objective for the purchasing department is coming from, as you can see on the left hand side, you see a purchasing market research coming in, and there you're researching the market for risk and opportunities, but you're also getting your input to your purchasing departments from the overall company strategy and objectives, because you will of course need to align your purchasing strategy with the overall corporate strategy. So there is a strong alignment between the corporate strategy and thereby their objectives and the purchasing objectives and strategy. You build up the strategy to support the objectives, as it says here, and then of course the planning of it, and then you slide into policy implementation. So the procurement organization controls the policies around quality and pricing and logistics around their supply base, and also the communication naturally. Once you have all that in place and you know what you are going for, and just to recap on that, the objective could very easily come from this triangle that we have just been through. I mean, what is it that we want to accomplish by our procurement organization? We go into operation, and then the procurement and the purchase management process slides into the control/inspection and evaluation. So KPIs are built up for the suppliers, and you are managing them maybe through a quarterly business review, and then as well as we slide over to the left in this process, you have this purchasing research that you are continuously scouting the market for opportunities and risks. And so it goes into reevaluating the objectives. So that's in essence is the purchasing management process. If you look at it from this model view, you can actually see on the x-axis you see time. So it's kind of how has this procurement really evolved over time from a rather simple transaction-orientated environment where the focus is to serve the factory, as it says on the focus area, all the way through up to value chain integration, where the focus is on total customer satisfaction. So this is how procurement has evolved over time. You can see in this model each of the focus areas that we will go through, because the next couple of slides I will just take you briefly through what is in each of the stages in this model. The blue circles, you can actually see where do we think that each of the industries are in at the moment. So you can see the focus area: serve the factory, reduce cost. Third phase is saving through synergy, still rather internal, functional, focus orientated. And then you slide into phase 4, total cost of ownership, or the TCO perspective, and then supply chain optimization, and finally total customer satisfaction. Underneath you see activities that goes into it and dilemmas, and even more important it is to look at the box in the bottom. This model should be used carefully, for all stages may not be relevant for all types of commodities, companies, and industries. And we will learn that throughout the course as we will look into a college segmentation model. There you will see some are strategic, some are leverage, some are bottlenecks, and some are just routine products. And depending on how we segment out up our commodities and our supply base, we will look for different relationships, and that is very critical to understand, because it does drive a lot of cost and resources to build up the different types of relationships. Stage 1, the primary task of purchasing is to find appropriate suppliers for raw materials and supply component. So really transaction orientated. You serve the factory, you make sure that the products are there when they need it. Stage number 2, then the strategies goes in to be a little bit more focused on lowering the overall cost of our procured components. The culture is that of playing hard negotiations with many suppliers. So we are going into really cost-focused scenario where it is the unit cost that is traditionally here in focus. Now, then we can slide over to stage 3 in the model, coordinated purchasing. So now we are trying to look across the company and try to make that buying power go through to the suppliers and bring down the overall cost. The emphasis here lies on cross-unit coordination and compliance with national negotiation contracts. So there we are again looking internally in the company. We are looking across all functions in the company, and then we are using our buying power centralized via a centralized purchasing department that goes out and negotiate hard on the cost again. And here you can see it: 1, 2, 3. Serve the factory, reduce the cost, saving through synergy inside the company. Now we slide over to number 4, as I said early on, goes more external to understand and bring in the full supply chain. So here you see the emphasis is on cross-functional problem solving now, with the objective of reducing total life cycle cost, or the TCO, and not just the unit cost. So now we move from really unit cost focused into understanding that there is a wider perspective, and in the end of the day, the cost that really matters to a company is the total cost of ownership, and that is now being brought in and understood in stage 4. Stage 5, external integration. Now we are looking at what should we be doing internally versus outside. I mean, here comes the outsourcing strategy. It's combined with extra attention to collaboration with supply chain partners on product development and pre-production planning. So now we are really widening up the scheme and looking to see if we can do some collaborative planning. Can we use the supplier base to reduce time to market and all of these good things? So now we are becoming much more sophisticated. And then finally we move into stage 6, value chain orientation, delivering value to end customer in order to satisfy the needs in end customer markets. Now here comes the word end customer. So not only our immediate customer, but actually the end customer. So now we are really looking throughout the entire value chain, both up and down, tier 1, 2, and customer tier 1, 2. So now we are really looking into the full value chain and see how can we make value for our final customer. As I said here again, in the bottom here in the box, it is to stipulate that we will be in different stages with different commodities, more than likely. And here you see the full scope of it again. So in conclusion, within this third chapter, the purchasing management process, we've seen that most companies have a large potential for improvement in the area of purchasing management. A systematic approach, we saw that that can help us guide us through the different stages. And you will also see in bullet point number 3 here that it does take time, and I think you can appreciate that after this short walkthrough. And then finally, consider the segmentation of your supply base, which we will dive much more into as we progress through this book, to build up the appropriate relationship for each supplier. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I will see you soon. Talk to you later. Bye.